Montana set the bar for housing and zoning reform. I don't know, you probably have been too, but I've been getting calls from across the country saying, how have you done this?
Ready, set, showtime. Welcome to the Montana Majority Report. Quick, transparent, and informative. Get the inside scoop on policies, people, and decisions shaping our state, all in less time than it takes to pour your morning coffee. Stay tuned. Montana starts right here.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Trebas from Senate District 10 in Great Falls, Montana. I'm here to help give the Montana Senate Majority Report with Forrest Mandeville out of Columbus.
And I'm Senator Forrest Mandeville out of Senate District 28 in Columbus.
We're here today to talk about housing bills specifically. We worked on what's been dubbed as the Montana Miracle last session in 2023 as part of the local government Senate committee. And Forrest comes with some experience and I come with ideas.
Yeah, I think we work well together, and we had a great time last session. Like Jeremy mentioned, I work in planning in my day job when I'm not up here. And I know Jeremy knows a lot about the background and the tax rates and how what we do in local government and how we develop ends up impacting what everyone ends up paying in property taxes. So I think we both have some good experience that works well together on the local government committee.
As a CPA, as an accountant, I'm looking into the economics of housing, and we're both about the same age, and I think we've both lived enough life to know that housing prices have changed in our lifetime.
They have. We lived enough life to see that, but we're not so old we're jaded, right?
We didn't buy our house for $5,000 and a peanut back in 1960.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I would have, but.
Yeah.
But no, we're here. The Montana Miracle last session was a series of some great bills. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is how much work went in the front end before we got to the Montana Miracle bills. There were people working in, I know the planners and the local governments were working in a working group to come up with ideas. The governor's housing task force was putting together some good ideas. And it all really came together in last session's local government committee. I know I carried the Land Use Planning Act, the LUPA, which really changes the way our biggest cities do their planning from the all the way down to zoning and long-range planning, all the way to the development permit process. Jeremy, you had a couple of good bills last session too.
Yeah, as part of that package, one of my bills was Senate Bill 323, and that had to do with allowing fourplexes on what would traditionally be a single residentially zoned lot, usually inside of a city. And really the idea behind that, again, going back to the economics of supply and demand, when those are mismatched, when there's more demand than supply, prices rise. And so this had to do with increasing density without government subsidies, without more red tape. And so that was the elegant idea behind adding density to land in a smaller area.
Yeah, and I know Senator Hertz had his accessory dwelling unit bill. Senator Zolnikoff had a bill to allow residential construction in commercially zoned areas. And yeah, it's what we call this gentle density. We're not always talking about 6-story high-rises full of apartments, right? We're talking about duplexes, triplexes, and accessory dwelling units, which allow people to age in place, which allow people to rent out a part of their building to help pay their mortgage. There's a lot of this that comes together to make for some good housing policy. I think they called it the Montana Miracle because so many other states and places had tried a lot of these similar policy objectives, and it just never went anywhere for whatever reason. I know there were Democrat states that couldn't get it passed. There were Republican states that couldn't get some of these passed. So being able to come together in a bipartisan way, these really weren't partisan bills. There was some breakdown on generational lines, but even that was a little fuzzy. It was just, I think, the realization that we needed to do something as a state and being able to get stuff done that a lot of other places haven't been able to do.
If you go and look at the proponents on the bill, especially on the House side, when my bill got over there to the House committee, it was a miracle the people that were behind it together as proponents. So
absolutely.
So not only bipartisan, but just vastly different ideological groups were on the same side on the same issue, which was a miracle to see.
Yeah, I've told people that, we had environmental groups that don't like sprawl supporting these bills because they liked the density. We had libertarian groups that were supporting these bills because they liked the freedom to do what you want within reason on your own property. We had some local governments were supporting some of these bills. We had realtors and the development community that was supporting these bills. So it was an amazing coalition that we were able to bring together. And I got to thank them as well for their help.
Everybody was holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
It was a little scary.
It was like, am I carrying the right bill here? I don't know what's happening, but it was good.
Montana set the bar for housing and zoning reform. I've been, I don't know, you probably have been too, but I've been getting calls from across the country saying, how have you done this? I even spoke at the American Planning Association conference in Minneapolis last year about, and it was standing room only. There were over 1,000 people in the room wanting to know how Montana did what we did.
Well, I think we have an independent streak, and you mentioned the different political factions and ideologies, but I think for some reason, and maybe it was the pre-planning and prep that went into it and the communication and discussion that happened before the session, but I think it was interesting to see, like we said, all the groups that were on board with it this round.
Yeah, but we're not done yet, are we?
That's right. I have a bill to bring back fourplexes. My bill last session got amended down to simply duplexes, which was good, and that ended up in a court challenge, and we're on the winning side of that. But really getting back to the focus of let's push for incremental increases in supply so we can have enough for everyone and at least slow the rise in prices.
Yeah, we've had some struggles from some of these not in my backyard groups. And I would characterize a lot of the bills that we have worked together on as YIMBY bills, the yes in my backyard, and allowing some of these uses and pushing back against the idea that because I was here first, I have veto power about everything else that happens.
Essentially, we end up in one giant HOA if we don't push back a little bit and say, yeah, you know what, within the four corners of my property, within reason, and within reason is subject to debate, we should be able to do what we like with our property, and that's the broader topic, property rights.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us are against property rights, right? We want to make sure that property rights are protected, that people can do what they want with their property, again, within reason. And we want to make sure that we can address some of these crises that are happening in our state. It's, I feel bad for people that are 15 years younger than we are, that are in their early 20s trying to afford a house. It's a lot more challenging than it was even when I was buying my first house or you were buying your first house.
Right, and I kind of think back to 2008, 2009. We had a lot of loose lending standards, but some of us got fixed mortgages, traditional fixed mortgages over 30 years. And, during that time, the Bush administration had zero down payment plans, which, they had the jumbo loans and the variable rates, which got people in trouble. But if you took out a responsible loan, that really was part of the American dream of home ownership and a place to grow and a place to grow your family. Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right. So I hope for those opportunities for others. I can't control banking standards and lending standards very much as a state legislature, but I think we need to pass the ladder down and hope that we can at least provide supply. I'm not really big into all the subsidies we provide because that's taxpayer dollars.
Right. But we are breaking down barriers to home ownership and breaking down some regulatory burdens that people run into. I have a bill that would take RV parks and mobile home parks out of the Subdivision and Platting Act and put it into the building for lease or rent process, which is a lot more streamlined. I also have had a bill that will hopefully speed up the process that counties use when they make zone text amendments. So if someone needs a change, they can get it if it's reasonable, again, without going through a 6-month process.
On the reasonableness front, obviously there are two sides to that, and we get a lot of pushback from local governments. Forrest as a planner, me as more of an accountant and landlord. I've owned property. We both pay property taxes. So I think, the balance is making sure you're not imposing on your neighbor something that's really egregious, but at the same time allowing you to, with, like you mentioned, ADUs, accessible dwelling units, those can help generate income that help you pay your property taxes.
Exactly. And I think from my perspective, the stuff that might annoy me about my neighbors, it's not that they have their mother-in-law living with them. It's when they have 16 dogs. It's and we don't require public hearings or whatever for dog ownership, and I'm fine with that. We shouldn't be, right? But it really turns into the slippery slope where everything needs massive public hearings, and like I said, the people that got there first have veto power over what happens forever and always.
So I've been in my neighborhood in Great Falls for it'll be 20 years next June. So we're coming up on that time, and I've seen a lot of neighborhood change. But I think the core to all this, beyond the law, is just being neighborly. Sometimes my neighbor does things like used to be there. Maybe they'd smoke outdoors during the summer and it'd waft into my house. Well, there's no law against that, and it's annoying. But, they have their property and I have mine. And there's been an auto repair shop essentially next to my house, single residentially zoned neighborhood, right? And duplexes go to the other side, and there's already a fourplex actually operating next to me, but that has been that way for 20 years. I had an upstairs-downstairs situation where I lived upstairs and had a rental downstairs, and that's technically an illegal duplex, but it's been happening, and that's in built properties already. So I think in some ways we're just streamlining the law to what's already occurring and unenforced, largely unenforced.
A lot of times unenforced, but there is an issue where sometimes people do something that's well-intentioned and don't realize that it's illegal, and sometimes that's what kind of points out to everyone that, hey, what's so wrong with this? What's the big issue that we're trying to address? And there are some issues that we've talked about. Parking, water and sewer capacity, stormwater drainage. We want to make sure that local governments do have the reasonable opportunity to address those. Right. And I do want to also just backtrack a little bit and say, just in case they're watching it, my neighbors have well-behaved dogs. They're actually very good dogs in my neighborhood. So I'm not talking about you guys.
Don't make this too personal.
Don't make it too personal.
When it comes to things like RVs being parked on the street, for a long time, that's kind of been cracked down in our city because it became an annoyance to enough people that the city acted. And so they have a process now for that. But yeah, we want to make sure you're good neighbors be neighborly, and that's not always the case in today's world, but that's really the core of it. But unfortunately, we need law to balance out the parties.
Well, I'm looking forward to what we get done this session.
Absolutely. Yeah, back to a laser focus on supply to curb the price increases that provide opportunities for the upcoming generations.
Yeah, we have to stop exporting our kids and make sure that they have a place to live here. I know you have a couple kids. I have
3 teenagers.
And I've got 3 not quite teenagers.
Not quite teenagers. So. They'll get there.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately.